Ashlyn finds herself and Clemmy trapped in an old smuggler's cave by Lucine, facing an uncertain fate. Lucine's brother Blake surprisingly offers to help them escape, but at what cost? Can Ashlyn and Clemmy trust him? Especially when they discover that Blake might be Clemmy's destined mate. As they return to Craven Pride and encounter Lucine's pack of wolves, how will Ashlyn use her makeshift flamethrower to aid in the battle? Join our pack. Subscribe to start your adventure. 22 How? I swallowed as fear left me paralyzed. How did you get here? What have you done to Etta? Lucine pursed her lips and strolled leisurely along the edge of the fountain, running her fingers over the concrete surface. Her eyes unsettled me. They were nothing but endless pools of darkness burning into my soul. Etta. She tapped her chin sagely. Oh, the little housekeeper. She died years ago. I've just been wearing her skin to keep an eye on the Balfours. She smirked. And by Balfours I mean Ryan. Lovely moment you had back there. Tell me, do his claws still come out when things get heated? Don't answer that, I said to myself. She's trying to get under your skin. Don't let her. Despite the fear she sparked within me, I tilted my chin up and looked her dead in the eyes. If you're here for Ryan, then you're too late. I've accepted the mark you've lost. I've lost my interest in you, and that is very dangerous. My feet were rooted in one place as she advanced towards me. Only when I attempted to back up did I realize that my feet could literally not move. Lifting the hem of the dress, my stomach turned as I saw dark red tendrils of smoke slither up my legs, binding me in one place. Lucine took pleasure in the terror on my face as she made the smoke curl around my waist, leaving no room for me to escape. This is what's going to happen. I can't have you breaking the curse and ruining something I've been looking forward to for 10 years. So you're coming with me and we're going to have some fun. Ryan will find me. I see that at her. Ryan doesn't have a sense of smell, and even if he did, he won't be able to track you down. My hope faltered, but I realized I had to play for time until he came back. If only I could scream for help. One of the wolves are bound to hear me. However, Lucine would kill me before I could even mutter a peep. Just as I thought all hope was lost, a deep throaty growl sounded behind me. Out of the blue, a dark wolf emanated from the hedge, placing itself between me and Lucine. My body went cold with dread when I recognized its smaller shape Clemmy. She snarled at Lucine, the fur on her neck bristling as she curled her lip back to display her fangs. If it isn't the youngest Balfour, still in the prime of her youth, Lucine said mockingly. Might as well bring you along for my brother to play with. With a single look from the half-witch, Clemmy burst out wailing in pain and dropped to the ground. I watched in horror as she writhed around, trying to cover her head with her paws to get rid of any form of torture Lucine was using on her. Stop it! I thrashed against the tendrils of smoke around my arms and legs, trying desperately to break free. Let her go. You have me, so let her go. Sorry. Lucine pouted. The more the merrier. I really do hope Ryan manages to find you before it's too late. It'd be a pity if he loses both his sister and mate in one evening. With an airy wave of her hand, the red smoke slithered upwards and consumed me whole. Darkness. That's all I knew while I was bound to a chair. Invisible binds keeping my wrists strapped to the armrests. My feet couldn't move either, although I had no idea what was keeping them contained. The chair didn't even budge as I thrashed around, and the sickening realization dawned on me that I'm trapped with no way to escape, not blindly anyways. My thoughts were scrambled with panic as I tried to think of ways to break free from whatever binds Lucine had me trapped with. If only I could see, that would be a great start. Screwing my eyes shut, I opened them to see nothing but pitch darkness. I repeated the process but got the same result. After blinking a third time, I noticed a bouquet of color clouding my vision. Blinking again, I could roughly make out shapes in the room or wherever I was. Slowly my sight returned. It seemed as if I was being kept in a medium-sized room with withered stone walls and floors. The air smelled damp and earthy, and judging by the stalactites that have formed after ages worth of dripping water, I'd say I'm in a cave of some sort. Amazing what one can do with a little magic. My head jerked to the side where Lucine was leaning against the cave wall. What did you do to me? I hissed, surprised that my voice worked. Deprived you of your sight. She said it as if it was a casual thing to do. I can make you blind, I can leave you deaf, I can take away your ability to smell and feel. Imagine a world without senses, where everything is dark, quiet, and empty. I bet you'd lose your mind. I stiffened when she advanced towards me. With a long manicured finger, she traced a line up my arm towards my shoulder. It took every ounce of self-control not to flinch away from her. I refused to give her the satisfaction of knowing I was scared. She could probably tell anyways with her werewolf senses. But I need all your senses at their peak for what I'm about to do next. Her words hardly left her mouth before her hand clamped down my forearm, and the most excruciating pain I've ever felt ripped through me. My screams tore through my body and shook the walls of the cave, causing the stalactites to rattle. And just like that, it stopped. Lucine's arm retracted to reveal a bloody and charred patch of skin on my arm in the shape of her hand. However, it didn't hurt. That's how it feels to have your sense of touch taken away from you. Her obsidian eyes danced with mirth. I can leave you like this, you'll never have to experience pain again. Imagine not being able to feel death when it slowly devours you piece by piece. Or, I gasped as the pain started all over again, thrashing and crying until my voice was hoarse. Or I could give it back to you. She shrugged. It's much more fun for me this way. Fighting against the blazing agony on my arm, I choked out, "What have you done to Clemmy?" Lucine checked her nails, seeming uninterested in my concern over the youngest Balfour. "Oh, the little runt. She's right behind you." Turning my head as far back as possible, I saw Clemmy out of the corner of my eye. We were back to back, however she was unresponsive to what was happening around her. "What did you do to her?" "The same I did to you, deprive her senses, only I deprived all of them." Lucine strolled lazily around me to stand in front of Clemmy. In a flash, she grabbed onto her arm like she did to me, and a split second later, my senses were filled with the smell of burnt flesh. "Stop it!" I cried and thrashed against the invisible bonds until my limbs were throbbing. "Stop it! Leave her alone." "Oh, please, it's not as if she can feel it unless I allow it. She'll heal in a minute." Lucine's fingers were under my chin, her nails scratching at my skin as she tilted my head up to look at her. "You, on the other hand, won't." To emphasize that statement, her claws shot out from her fingers and embedded themselves into my shoulders. The pain worked its way through my shoulder blades and down my arms, and I stifled a scream as she gave her claws a twist. When she finally tore them out of my flesh, her hands were covered with blood, my blood. She brought it to her nose and inhaled its scent, humming in delight. "I'm going to leave the two of you here for now. I've got some other business to attend to. But in the meanwhile, I'm sending my brother to keep you company. He's been frustrated since I've brought you here." She blew me a kiss over her shoulder before disappearing into the dark. My head fell back in utter exhaustion. The burn wound on my arm felt like it was still ablaze, and the claw holes in my shoulders throbbed with even the smallest of movements. Looking down at myself, I frowned in displeasure. That bitch ruined my dress. The skirts were torn and stained, one of the straps broke, and now the entire top was covered in blood. "Bitch," I muttered to myself. "Ash." I perked up when hearing Clemmy's voice, wincing at the sting in my shoulders. "Clemmy, are you alright? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," she breathed. "What did she do to me?" I felt nothing. Everything was dark and quiet. I couldn't pick up a scent, couldn't even taste the air. "Lucine took away your senses. It's her poetic way of torturing us. Are you okay? I can smell your blood." I nodded even though she couldn't see. "I'll survive. We need to find a way to escape though." Peering down at my feet, I noticed the same red smoke tendrils keeping me bound and in place. This was proving to be a challenge. "You don't by any chance know any spells, right?" I wondered out loud. "Only one to get Victor to bring me food." "Not quite the spell we're looking for." Distant footsteps sounded somewhere deeper into the cave. We both froze and stared into the darkness. I squinted my eyes, trying to make out any shapes that might give me an idea who was coming, although I had a nauseating feeling I already knew. If Lucine let me off the hook with only a third-degree burn wound and a set of claw marks on each shoulder, I shuddered to think what her brother would do to us. Reaching as far back as possible, I felt my fingers graze against Clemmy's. In a beat, she grabbed onto my hand. I could feel her shivering in fear. Even a werewolf with claws and fangs was terrified of what was coming. I braced myself for the worst when the footsteps stopped. Any time now the pain will come. I just hoped he'd leave Clemmy alone and take his frustrations out on me instead. But all that followed was complete and utter silence. At last I braved a look at him. His height was imposing, however. His lack of soulless features like Lucine made him slightly less intimidating than her. His lack of dark eyes and red hair made me wonder how they were related. Perhaps their similarities were found in their sinister personalities, or their shared love for inflicting pain on their prisoners. We'd find out soon. I held my breath, waiting for him to start torturing us, to spout flames from his hands and burn us alive. But all he did was stare at us with an unreadable expression on his stoic face. The next thing I knew, he turned abruptly and marched back the way he came. We listened to his footsteps fade in the distance, exhaling in relief when he's finally gone. That was strange, Clemmy whispered, and all I could do was nod. Something told me this was far from over, and only a miracle could save us now. 23. There was no way of telling how long we've been in that cave. It could be minutes, it could be hours, but all I knew was my ass was hurting like a bitch from sitting this long. Clemmy has been uncharacteristically quiet and hasn't spoken for. I had no idea. If only there was a gap in the roof, a crack in the wall, or anything that could help me determine how long it's been since the ball. I'm hungry, Clemmy whispered behind me. It was the first time I heard her voice in Goddesses Know How Long. My stomach cramped at the thought of food. I haven't had anything to eat since the afternoon before the ball. Yeah, me too. I didn't expect Lucine to bring us food or anything. We're her prisoners to toy with until she grows bored and kills us. When she'll kill us was also a mystery. I imagine she was pissed at me for nearly ruining her 10-year plan of conquering the werewolf world. I could also imagine she had a lot of frustration she needed to take out on someone. The wound on my arm stung as a reminder of how Lucine burned me with a single touch. It crossed my mind that, if not treated soon, the wound might get infected. Chances of survival -1. And if it was up to Lucine -7. What was that? Clemmy asked warily. Just calculating how chances of survival, I replied, realizing I must have said all of that out loud. And are the odds in our favor? Not really. She exhaled slowly and said with determination, Rian will find us. He will get us out of here. A frown tugged at my lips. He would if he could. Lucine said no one would find us here, and even if he could, Rian has no sense of smell. The curse is permanent now. I failed. Oh no, don't start with the I'm a failure act. Her sharp tone of voice surprised me. I know you think you're responsible for saving everyone, but you're not, Ash. Clemmy sucked in a deep breath before continuing. Lucine deprived Rian of his sense of smell so he couldn't find his mate. But you found him. Somehow, even while human, you found a loophole. You can still break the curse. In case you haven't noticed, we're tied up by magic, I pointed out. I don't think there's a loophole to that. Maybe she can't keep the spells up when she's unconscious. Clemmy wondered out loud. Listen, that night at the ball when you and Rian snuck out, Kenna and I followed you and we saw Etta turn into Lucine. I told Kenna to go tell the others while I try keeping Lucine distracted long enough for the packs to show up. They know we're gone and they know who took us. If all the packs work together, they'll find us. I just know it. That was actually clever, I admitted, truly impressed by her strategy. There was only one problem. But how do you suppose we knock Lucine out long enough to escape? That is if she drops the magic. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Clemmy look upwards at the stalactites dangling from the cave ceiling. Those seem a bit unstable, don't you think? A tiny spark of hope ignited within me as I recalled how they rattled as I screamed when Lucine burned me. And there were hundreds of them above us. I don't think I can scream that loud, though, I muttered. No, but I can howl. The plan wasn't perfect, but it could work. It's all we had. All we had to do now was wait until Lucine returned. It turned out we didn't have to wait long either. The cave floor flooded with dark red smoke to announce Lucine's arrival. It pooled around her ankles as she emerged out of the dark with her brother short on her heels. The torch against the wall flickered at her presence and I swear I could feel the air turn colder. Lucine dragged her nails across our shoulders, scratching at the holes she left on mine with a satisfied smirk. I gritted on my teeth as tears pricked in the corner of my eyes while Clemmy bared her fangs at the half-witch. Someone needs to learn some manners, she tooted and seized Clemmy by the throat. I thrashed against the invisible bonds when her screams shook the walls and the smell of burnt flesh hit my nose. No. Stop it, leave her. Only when Clemmy's screams turned hoarse did Lucine stop. The young Balfour uttered a sob, her breaths coming out in pants and heaves. I felt sick, my stomach churning as Lucine stepped back to pick the charred skin off her fingers. Why don't you kill us already? Clemmy choked between sobs. Kill you? Now. The half-witch frowned. Now where's the fun in that? Don't get me wrong, I am going to kill you eventually. I just want your pack to be present for the show. My heart dropped to my stomach as she leaned down to meet my eyes. I want Rian to watch me tear you apart, watch as his world bleeds out at my feet, knowing he can't do anything to save you. Her hand latched onto the burn wound on my arm and my cries echoed through the cave as she squeezed. Lucine's smile was sinister as she dragged a finger up my arm, watching the smoke swirl from my skin in curiosity. I was a thrashing, screaming mess. My vision clouded with dots as she enclosed her hand around my upper arm, scorching the flesh until only raw tissue remained. At last, Lucine stepped back to admire her handiwork. Beautiful. You wanted a mark so badly, now you have it. Patting my cheek, she stepped back towards her brother. You've met Blake yesterday, didn't you? He told me he has something special planned for you while I prepare for my descent on Craven Pride. Clemmy went frigid behind me at the thought of her pack being in danger. Time to go, Lucine chirped and strutted off, patting Blake's shoulder as she passed him. I'm handing them over to you. Don't get too carried away, brother mine. I want them alive for public execution. Blake said nothing as she disappeared into the shadows. Clemmy and I were frozen in fear as his eyes locked on us. He stalked forward, his feet making next to no sound as he moved. I felt Clemmy's fingers tangled with mine, holding on for dear life as he paused in front of her. Don't you dare touch her. My voice was nothing but a whisper, hoarse from screaming. My threat was empty though. Even if I wasn't bound by magic to this chair, I stood no chance against a half-werewolf wizard hybrid. An idea hit me like a punch to the gut. Craning my neck, I noticed a stalactite right above Blake's head. It was big enough to either leave him with a concussion or kill him. Both could work in our favor. Giving Clemmy's hand a desperate squeeze, I muttered under my breath, now. I felt her fingers stiffen against mine before I heard the muscles in her face contort. The next thing I knew, an earth-shattering howl ripped through the cave and shuddered the walls. The stalactites trembled and rattled, cracking as they started to break loose. Blake's head jerked up, his eyes widening at the sight of the ceiling giving in. I held my breath as the stalactite broke and plummeted down. But he flinched back, and it missed him by an inch. Shit. His eyes flashed as he glowered at us, and Clemmy thrashed against her invisible holds when his gaze locked on her once again. This was it. Either he kills us or we get crushed by stalactites. Blake took one step towards her when, out of nowhere, a rock dropped from the ceiling and on his head. A moment later he toppled to the ground unconscious. And just like that, the invisible binds on our wrists and the smoke tendrils around our legs disappeared. Clemmy turned in her chair, disbelief evident in her gray eyes. In a flash, she threw her arms around my neck, only to pull back when I hissed in pain. I'm sorry, I forgot you can't heal like me. Doesn't matter, I said, we have to get out of here before we end up like him. Glancing at Blake's sprawled out body on the ground, she shook her head in agreement. My legs were wobbly when I pushed off the chair, my knees buckling with every step I took. Squinting my eyes against the dark, I tried looking for a way out. But everything was pitch black and the stalactites were falling more rapidly around us. I see it, Clemmy called above the noise, follow me. She grabbed the hand which Lucine didn't fry and pulled me with her deeper into the cave. It led us to a narrow tunnel at the end. I had to rip off most of the layers of my skirt to fit through the crack, stifling an agonizing cry every time my burned arm brushed against the rough walls. Almost there. Clemmy tried encouraging me. Almost there. I repeated in my head. At last, we squeezed through the crack to find ourselves inside another cave. Clemmy stopped dead in her tracks, causing me to bump into her. Before I could ask her what the holdup was, I saw it for more tunnels, all leading in different directions. 3 of them lead to certain death, the other to freedom. We spun around to see Blake standing behind us. Although he healed, half of his face was still covered with blood from the rock's impact. I pushed Clemmy behind my back. If he wanted her, he'd have to go through me first. Hopefully I could hold him off long enough for her to run. You'll never find the right one. His steel blue eyes shifted from me to Clemmy. Not without my help, at least. 24. And why should we trust you? Clemmy snarled at him. You were going to torture us. How should we know you won't lead us down the wrong path on purpose? Blake made a move to approach us, but I shoved Clemmy back to keep him away from her. On the other side of the wall from where we came, I could hear the cave collapsing into itself. The ground trembled under my feet, warning us to keep moving to escape. "I'm not asking you to trust me," he stressed. "I'm saying I can get you out of here." "That sounds the same as asking us to trust you." Clemmy crossed her arms over her chest. Rocks and sand began falling from the ceiling above our heads as the cave structure started to crumble. My eyes traveled between Clemmy and Blake as I said desperately, "Stop arguing, both of you. We have to get out of here before the roof gives in." Glaring at Blake, I added, "Don't make me regret this." With a single nod, he took off towards the second tunnel. Grabbing onto Clemmy's hand, I made sure she stayed close as we followed Blake. From the front, he created two misty spheres of light in his hands, illuminating the tunnel for us to see what's ahead. The farther we progressed, the colder the air became. I shivered when an icy breeze swept past my face and bare shoulders, causing goosebumps to spread across my arms. "We're close," Blake informed, glancing back at us. My hand tightened around Clemmy's as we rounded another corner. Then we saw it light at the end of the tunnel. The ground beneath my feet quaked as the cave we stood in a few seconds ago collapsed. Chunks of rock and sand rained down on us, and out of nowhere, the tunnel floor cracked wide open. Blake twisted his wrists and several gray smoke tendrils blasted from his palms. Slithering towards the crack, they attached themselves to either side of the torn floor to mend the gap. Picking up the pace, we rushed forward and past the mended crack. We hardly made it to the other side before I heard it crumble and collapse as Blake dropped the spell. A rusted iron gate was the only thing that stood in the way of us and our freedom. Blake thrust a hand forward and the gate flew clean off its hinges. There wasn't time to marvel at his strange yet astonishing abilities. We still had to escape whatever this place was and get back to Craven Pride. I only hoped Lucine wouldn't beat us to it. Blake was the first to exit the tunnel, standing aside to let us through. The moment the fresh air filled my senses, I uttered a sound between a laugh and sob. We were standing on a beach with the waves crashing only a few feet from us. The cave Lucine kept us in must have been an old smuggler's den centuries ago. It didn't surprise me that she chose it out of all places to act as her evil villain lair. Clemmy threw her head back to inhale the salty air, smiling when a bit of rain drizzled on her face. My eyes found their way to Blake, who was staring at her in contemplation. "Why did you help us?" He blinked from whatever trance he's been in and turned away. It's hard to explain. Not an excuse, I argued. "Little over a week ago, I discovered werewolves and dark curses were real. You just magicked a gate off its hinges, and Lucine uses smoke to turn into an old lady who I thought I used to know. Now that's hard to explain." With a huff, he turned towards us, locking eyes with Clemmy. "Look, I don't know anything about this or how it's supposed to feel. But you think we are. While he was struggling to form a coherent sentence, I had a moment of realization where it literally struck me like lightning. When I saw him for the first time in the cave, he approached Clemmy and me with only one goal in mind: to torture us. But he didn't. He froze. At first I thought he was looking at me, but now I knew he wasn't. He was looking past me at Clemmy, just as he was looking at her a minute ago. I knew that look. That's how Rian looks at me. That is how a werewolf looks at their reason to live. The moment it clicked, my jaw nearly hit the beach. "She's your mate." Clemmy's eyes grew at the revelation. I felt her hand slacking in mine as her body went numb with shock. Blake and I simultaneously reached out to capture her before she could drop to the sand. She flinched away from him when he tried touching her and pressed herself into me as if I could grow claws and fangs and protect her if he decided to pry her off me. "You can't be my mate," she whispered. "I don't feel anything towards you. Because you're too young." He swallowed visibly. His eyes were dark and desperate as he looked at her. "You can only feel the bond when you're 18. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "What if I don't want you as a mate? You're evil. Anyone with ties to Lucine is. I don't want what has happened to my brother to happen to me." My heart clenched at the helplessness he displayed. Call me naive or soft, but something told me Blake wasn't like his sister. Perhaps in the past, yes, I imagined him as the type of person who'd torture people for stress relief. And perhaps he would have tortured us if Clemmy didn't turn out to be his mate. We'll never know. All I knew was that he helped us. If not for him, we'd either be crushed by the cave collapsing, or left for Lucine to have her wicked fun with. In real life, that wouldn't be enough to redeem him. As the daughter of a lawyer, I knew that much. A murderer doesn't walk free by doing a good deed. But this wasn't real life anymore, not how I knew it at least. The world of the supernatural has different laws, different beliefs, and I didn't know enough of it to judge Blake for what he was intended to do to us. What I did know was we were alive because his immediate bond with Clemmy saved not only us, but him as well. Perhaps Clemmy was the push toward redemption he needed. Don't say anything you'd regret later, I told her sincerely. He helped us escape and now we must help him redeem himself. And in 2 years when you turn 18 and experience the bond for yourself, then you can decide whether you want it or not. Clemmy wiped her eyes, stealing a glance at Blake. I don't trust him. Me neither, but right now he's the one helping us save the pack. Plus, I whispered into her ear although Blake could hear it with his werewolf senses, I know you think he's cute. The only response I got was a glare and an elbow in the side. What, I was a teenager too once. Behind us, Blake cleared his throat awkwardly. I imagined he didn't receive many compliments before, even less being called cute. We need to move. Lucine isn't alone. She has her own pack of werewolves to take Craven Pride by force if necessary. Her plan is to kill those who won't follow her, and use them to set an example for the other packs in Europe. Clemmy's hand clamped over her mouth. My pack. I grasped her hand, hoping to provide her with some comfort. What about the curse? Rian's already bound to her. Can't she just manipulate him into surrendering? He shook his head gravely. The curse isn't permanent yet. She has to mark him to bound him to her. Of course, the mark. I should have known Lucine would want to end this in some poetic manner. However, a flicker of hope sparked within me. You're saying there's still a way to stop her? Blake nodded thoughtfully. I might be able to conjure a spell to restrain her. There's a ritual that can strip her of her magic. Without it, the curse is sure to be broken. We just need to keep her away from Rian, because she will mark him if she sees her chance. The sun was setting in the distance, announcing the end of the day. I wanted to scoff. Seriously, I only came here to photograph a wedding, not fight against a half-werewolf, half-witch psychopath in a werewolf war. But damn it, I love Rian and I'm not going to let that witch take him away from me. How much time do we have to get back? I asked. Blake quirked a brow. Does 2 seconds sound good? Before either of us could ask what he meant, a cloud of smoke swiveled up around us and the ocean and beach disappeared. It felt like my organs were rearranging themselves as we spun around and around and around until we came to an abrupt stop. Clemmy staggered into me as she lost her footing while I extended both my arms in a pathetic attempt to regain my balance. The smoke vanished to reveal us standing on the shore next to the lake at Craven Pride. It felt like I could kiss the pebbles underneath my feet as I took in my surroundings. A few feet to the left was Victor's Thinking Rock where we hung out one morning. Just up the slope was the path that led to my photo studio, and among the trees behind us was the chapel where the wedding took place. We're home. Clemmy made a dash for the castle, only for Blake to grab onto her arm and pull her back. What do you think you're doing? She tried prying his hands off her. What does it look like? I'm going to warn my pack against your sister. However, she stiffened when her werewolf senses picked up a disturbance in the atmosphere. Clemmy looked at me with eyes wide with terror. They're already here. Panic surged through me at her words. All I could think about was Rian. He probably went out of his mind after the ball when both his sister and mate were taken by Lucine. And I don't blame him. If the roles were reversed, I would have felt the same. I imagined how helpless he must have felt with no sense of smell and no way of tracking us down. What's the plan? I pushed the fear aside to focus. Blake looked at me as if I was crazy. You're not doing anything. That offended me. And why not? First off, you're a human, you can't fight or heal as we can. And secondly, you're already injured. You'd only be a liability, and that's the last thing Rian needs while he should be focused on fighting Lucine. Then what? I should go hide in the castle until the fight eventually ends. That would be helpful, yes. He nodded. Clemmy wasn't arguing with him, much to my dismay. If anyone should be sticking up for me at this moment, it should be her. What about me? She looked at Blake. You stay with me. She opened her mouth to protest, but he cut her off before she could even utter a word. I know you don't trust me yet, but please believe me when I say I would do anything to keep you safe. If something happens to you, if you get hurt in any way, there is no telling what I'd do. Just stay with me. I saw her scowl soften as her resolve shattered. With a single nod, she agreed to his plea. Their moment was interrupted when a bone-chilling howl sounded in the distance. A moment passed until another one followed, and then a third and a fourth until an entire symphony of howls echoed in the night sky. Clemmy shrunk back at the noise, inching closer to Blake as he studied the starry sky. He inhaled slowly before saying the words I feared. It has begun. 25. I watched Clemmy and Blake sprint off towards the battle, leaving me standing on the shore. Nothing about this felt right. I needed to be there with them. I wanted to help even if that meant throwing the enemy with cans of soup. The irony was I'm human. I couldn't grow claws and fangs and turn into a wolf the size of a polar bear to defeat my enemies. And the last thing I wanted was to be a liability on the battlefield as Craven Pride defended their territory against Lucine and her pack. As much as I despised admitting it, Blake was right. Rian should focus on surviving, not on protecting me. With that heavy thought in mind, I took off toward the castle while the howls continued in the distance. All I could do as I hurried across the grounds was hope and pray that no one would get hurt, that Blake would get the chance he needed to confine Lucine and perform his ritual on her. It would be up to Rian to decide what to do with her once her magic had been stripped. Finally, the back door of the castle came into view. Bursting through it, I entered the kitchen. For good measure, I moved a table in front of the door in case an enemy wolf would break through it. The silence of the castle is palpable, almost unnatural. My movements and rapid breaths are the only sounds that filled the grave silence as I searched the drawers and cabinets for something. Anything that I could use as a weapon. Once I found a rather big knife, I set out to search for any medical supplies I could use to wrap around my arm. It's throbbing after my hasty trek over the castle grounds, and the smallest of movements pulled agonizingly at my charred skin. When I couldn't find any first aid kits in the kitchen, I hurried to one of the downstairs bathrooms to continue the search. One would think the staff would keep a first aid kit close by where they worked, but it seemed I thought wrong. Entering the bathroom, I slammed the door closed and locked it, paranoid with the raging sounds coming from outside. If an enemy wolf did catch my scent and came for me, at least they'd have to break down the door first, thus giving me enough time to ready the knife if necessary. Dropping to my knees, I rummaged through the cabinets underneath the sinks, keeping my injured arm as still as possible. Where the hell is it? I muttered in panic as I yet again couldn't find a first aid kit. Out of the blue, a knock sounded at the door. My heart jolted as I held the knife toward the source of the sound, backing up until my back pressed against the cold wall. My breath was shallow and fast as I stared at the door handle, fearing the moment it would turn and open. Ashlyn. I clamped my hand over my mouth to muffle the utter sound of relief when I recognized the voice. Grandma Celine. Unlocking the door, I step aside as she rushed in, eyes blown wide with panic as she embraced me in a hug. Goddess 3, we were so worried. Everyone thought Lucine killed you and Clemmy. Rian was livid with anger. He nearly leveled the fountain when Kenna delivered the news. The feeling of her warmth seeping into me was enough to make my eyes well up with tears. But there wasn't time for heartfelt reunions, not while my mate was out there fighting for his life and freedom. I'm fine, Grandma, I said and pulled back, but I need to find a first aid kit to get my arm wrapped up. There is a possibility that Lucine can be stopped, and I want to help in any way I can. Like hell am I staying put in the castle while the pack is fighting in the battle outside. As soon as my arm's wrapped up, I'm going out to help, which is why I brought this. Grandma Celine placed a battered tin in my hands, and I can vaguely see the outlines of a red cross on it. I smelled the stench of burnt flesh the moment you entered the castle. Knew it was you right away. The kit is a bit outdated, but it'll work. Here, let me help. While I held the tin, she set to work cleaning my wounds as carefully as possible. But no matter how cautious she was, the level of agony caused by Lucine's burns didn't compare to anything else I've ever felt. I'm sorry, dear, so sorry, she stressed as I choked on my cries after she debrided some of the dead skin from the wound. This was caused by witch fire. It's bound to hurt a hell of a lot more. Once most of the grime and dirt of escaping the cave was gone, she applied a soothing ointment to the raw wounds before wrapping my arm from wrist to shoulder with a bandage. Despite my body being stiff from writhing around, and my breathing shallow and rapid, I couldn't miss the deep frown etched on her face. What's wrong? I asked hoarsely, fearing the worst, that the burns are too severe, and I might lose my arm. Because let's be honest, that's how much it hurt. The scars that will form once those wounds heal, she began gravely, they might never fade. Even if you accept Rian's mark and become a werewolf, you'll never heal. That's what witch fire does. No creature can ever heal from it. My stomach sank at the thought of having to wake up each day and see Lucine's marks on my arm. If I twisted my limb at an angle, the scars resembled a shackle with its cuffs binding my wrist and upper arm, a symbol that I've been the witch's prisoner. However, there wasn't time to wallow on that thought. It's cleaned, it's wrapped up, and at least the pain will someday subside. Right now I had to find a way to help Rian. Grandma Celine, I said and grasped her hands desperately. I want to help Rian in any way I can. I know I'm just a human, but you would have done the same if it were you in my shoes. Werewolf abilities or no. You know more about this world than anyone. Is there any way I stand a chance against a werewolf? She opened her mouth and I got the feeling she was going to protest, no doubt try talking me out of my crazy plan. But then she paused and her shoulders sagged. Her silence proved I was right. She would have done whatever she could to help her mate in a fight, even if that meant getting hurt in the process. She was more human than a werewolf, and that's where we were the same. Not many things can kill a werewolf, Grandma Celine started. Their skins and fur are too thick to be penetrated by most steel objects, and silver, as you found out, isn't considered a weakness to us. I cringed inwardly at the memory of that first awkward family dinner. I still can't believe I made such a spectacle over silver cutlery. It seemed the knife I grabbed from the kitchen just lost its value. Wait. My eyes grew when I recalled something that was said that night. Well, we're not fireproof, Victor stated and waved one of the candlesticks at Rian. How about fire? I asked the older woman, will that do any harm? Grandma Celine narrowed her eyes before nodding sagely. That might just do the trick. Most creatures can be killed with fire, vampires, witches, even werewolves. That was the answer to my problem. But now a new question presented itself. How do I get close enough to an enemy to set it ablaze without it sensing me and biting off my head? Striking a match and tossing it at the wolf won't work. Neither would holding a candle to its fur. I'd have to get really close for it to catch fire. The most effective weapon would have been a flamethrower, I figured. At first it was just a thought, but the more it brewed and simmered, the more it became a consideration. That would be an effective weapon indeed. Do you know if there are any liquid fuels in the castle? The older woman pondered the question before answering. There is some lamp oil and lighter fluid in the staff's quarters. What are you planning, dear? My grandma used to be a teacher before she retired, I said and brushed past her into the hall. In fact, she taught me most of the things I know, and that includes how to build a flamethrower from scratch. She sounds like my kind of person, Grandma Celine agreed as she followed on my heels. What should I do? My eyes searched the corridor until I found the basis of my flamethrower, a fire extinguisher. Unhooking it, I tossed it at the older woman, who caught it effortlessly. Any chance you still have some of that werewolf strength left? She grinned and twisted the cap of the fire extinguisher clean off. A yellow powder burst from the open nozzle and coated everything it touched in a light dust. Grandma Celine remained on her spot, that grin never leaving her face as the dust settled around us. How's that, dear? She quirked a brow. My eyes were blown wide after that minor act of toughness. At last, I found the words to speak. I think that was utterly badass and that you and my grandma would have gotten along just fine. I'm looking forward to meeting her at your and Rian's wedding then. She gripped the fire extinguisher under her arm and marched past me toward the kitchen. Now let's go build a flamethrower and send all those fuckers to hell. 26. The battle has escalated in the 20 minutes I've been busy crafting the flamethrower. The entire process shouldn't have lasted longer than 10 minutes, but given the limited resources I had to work with, I just had to endure the extra minutes to ensure the weapon actually worked. Also, if not for Grandma Celine, it would have taken a lot longer. While I did most of the building, she used her werewolf strength to bend all the tougher components so they could fit around the fire extinguisher. And I could proudly say, after testing it on a rock in the garden, our weapon was functionable. With the flamethrower in hand, I approached the back door to fight in the battle against Lucine, only for a hand to yank me back. Now hold your wolves, Grandma Celine said as she made me look her in the eyes. I hope you're not planning on running headfirst in there and blast every werewolf with fire as you go. Even a pup can write a list of things that will go wrong. Ultimately, I had nothing to say to counter her words. I'm going to admit, beyond building a flamethrower and making sure it worked, I didn't have a plan going forward. That's what I thought. She huffed knowingly. You might burn 1 or 2 wolves to a crisp before a small pack of them come for you. And once they have you surrounded, you're as good as dead. Besides, how are you planning on telling apart the bad wolves from our own blood? What if you accidentally burn Rian? She had a point there. I had to be smarter about this. I had my weapon check. But now I needed a way of using it without the Craven Pride pack or any of their allies getting in the way. The most common way of separating the good from the bad would be to bait them into a trap where I'd be able to blast them with the flamethrower. I raked my thoughts for suitable places that could hold a werewolf, while also providing me with an escape route once the fire started spreading. Does the garage outside have a back door? I asked the older woman. Yes, and you can also control the roller doors with a remote. I believe Rian has one dangling with his car keys. Good, I might have a plan. Before she could ask what it was, I threw my arms around her in a tight embrace. This was where our paths had to split. She made a promise to her mate to look after their legacy, and if something was to happen to her on that battlefield. Swallowing the lump in my throat, I whispered to her, "Thank you for everything, Gran. If all goes according to plan, I'll see you later." What are you? Before she could finish that sentence, I let her go and rushed out of the back door, trying my best to tune out her desperate calls against the raging howls in the night. Without looking back, I sprinted all the way to my photo studio on the cliff, wasting no time to grab everything I needed and stuffing it into my camera bag. Before leaving, I briefly caught my reflection in the full-sized mirror against the wall. I looked horrendous with my torn and blood-stained dress, my bandaged arm, and my hair clinging to my face and shoulders in wild, tousled strands. Grinding my teeth, I reached down and tore off the dress just above my knees, allowing me more freedom to move. Using the spare hair tie I kept in my camera bag, I tied up my hair into a high ponytail. That's better. Now to make my way to the garage without getting maimed and killed. The cold air made my eyes well up as I ran along the rose gardens towards the front of the castle, passing the fountain where Lucine so rudely kidnapped Clemmy and me. And just as Grandma Celine said, it was nearly destroyed, a reminder of Rian's unbridled rage when his sister and mate were taken. My burnt arm and Lucine's claw marks on my shoulders stung with every move, combined with the weight of the flamethrower underneath my good arm, and the strap of the backpack grazing the holes the witch left on my back. The agony nearly consumed me, but I forced it to the back of my head. Ignore it, Ash. Focus. My bare feet patted against the sidewalk as I rounded the castle. In the distance, I could hear the blood-curdling snarls and barks coming from the werewolves who were fighting in the battle. Keeping myself from thinking about Rian was nearly impossible. Even the mere thought of him getting hurt was enough to drive me insane. I hoped from the bottom of my heart Clemmy and Blake could get the other packs to keep Lucine away from Rian. I paused when I reached the front lawn. The garage was about 700 yards from where I stood, all the way on the other side of the raging battle in front of me. My legs were frozen as I beheld the gruesome scene. Werewolves were attacking each other left and right, grabbing onto each other's necks, tearing out tufts of fur, and burying their claws in each other's flesh. It was impossible to distinguish the good wolves from the bad. The only werewolf I truly recognized was the smaller one sticking close to Blake. Clemmy. She snarled at the wolves who dared to come close to her while Blake used his magic to take his sister's army down. I watched him render 4 werewolves helpless with a single flick of his hand, leaving them whining and writhing on the grass until Clemmy finished them off. I was relieved that he remained true to his word by keeping her safe, but there was still the mission of getting my ass to the garage. 700 yards. Less than half a mile. It shouldn't look as difficult, but there's a reason why I didn't compete in sports in high school. I suck at sports. And now, there was also the problem of getting past the snarling, jaw-snapping werewolves on the way. Lucine surely knew we escaped by now. It's hard to miss Blake and Clemmy fighting alongside amid the battlefield. No doubt she would have given her pack the order to kill any human girls on sight. You can do this, I told myself, bouncing on my feet to get the blood flowing. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as I pushed forward. Fear clenched my heart every time a wolf would appear in my line of sight, only to have another pounce on it, wrestling it to the ground. I kept my eyes trained forward at the garage. Focus. I had to focus. Out of nowhere, a wolf dropped at my feet, scurrying to get up. I was too late to dodge it and tripped, plummeting face first to the grass. Agonizing pain shot up my arm as the bandage pressed into the raw wounds. I stifled my cries as tears blurred my vision. rolling onto my back to clutch my throbbing arm against my chest. I was just in time to see an enormous shape falling towards me. Cursing, I threw myself to the side and dodged the wolf's body by an inch. In a flash, another was pinning it to the ground, its jaws snapping at its throat. They were so close I could smell their fur and feel their warm breaths fan across my face. I scurried to my feet to put some distance between me and the fighting werewolves until another nearly crushed me when it leapt over my head. My body threw itself backwards to dodge it, but ended up bumping into a furry shape that appeared out of nowhere. A gush of warmth hit my back and I froze. Turning around slowly, fear seized my heart as I stared into the crazed eyes of a wolf. Its lip curled back, baring its fangs as it prowled towards me. Not a good guy then. I swallowed when I saw the bloodstains around its mouth and snout. One bite, that's all it would take for it to kill me, no doubt tearing me to pieces afterwards. Crouched down ready to attack. I held my breath, accepting my fate that I would die in the jaws of a werewolf. Time slowed down as it launched itself at me. But out of nowhere, another wolf tackled it to the ground. It happened so fast I had to blink to make sure it really happened. My legs were like jelly as I watched my savior, a salt and pepper-colored wolf, tear at the other's flesh. It pinned the wolf to the grass with its paws and finally locked its jaws around my attacker's throat. The wolf uttered a shrill whine before its body went limp. The gray wolf snarled at it one last time before jerking its head to me. Although its blue eyes were drowning with concern, I could still detect the warmth in them. I'd recognize those eyes anywhere, Craig. He looked at me as if asking Queen's bullocks, "Lass, what the bloody hell are you doing here?" "I need to get to the garage," I said. "There's no time to explain. Can you help me?" Craig's eyes shifted from me to the battle around us before lowering himself to the ground. I wasted no time climbing onto his back, holding on for dear life as he took off in a sprint. My skin burned due to the cold as he dashed towards the garage, weaving through wolves along the way. I held on for dear life despite my arm feeling like it would tear off at any second. I kept my eyes open, searching the grounds for Lucine or a wolf with dark red fur and cold, obsidian eyes. Where was she? Craig skidded to a halt near the garage's entrance, bending his legs so I could slide off. We managed to catch the attention of two werewolves who didn't waste any time coming after me. Before they could get too close, Craig placed himself between me and them, snarling every time they tried slipping past him to get to me. While he was distracting them, I bolted for the garage and nearly threw the back door off its hinges. Wasting no time, I placed the flamethrower on the ground and unpacked the backpack's contents onto the workbench: battery-powered strobe lights, foldable reflectors, portable LED spotlights, and finally, the new Canon camera Rian gave me. 3 years of photography experience combined with adrenaline took hold of me as I arranged the lights and reflectors around the garage at strategic angles. Next, I created a gasoline trail from the center of the room toward the back door, where I placed the flamethrower for easy access when the time is right. With my camera in hand and the remote to the garage doors in the other, I took my place in front of the large roller doors and inhaled slowly, trying to calm my trembling breaths. Outside, I could still hear Craig warding off the wolves, reminding me of what came next. "You got this," I told myself again. Tightening my grip on the camera, I pressed the button on the remote and watched the doors lift off the ground. Don't let the story end. Subscribe to continue our Wolfpack legend.